Welcome to the Atlanta Men's Workshop speaker and workshop recordings. Atlanta Men's Workshop is held every spring and fall at the Rock Eagle 4-H campus in Eatonton, Georgia. That's just about an hour east of Atlanta, Georgia. Please visit our website at atlantamensworkshop.com or see the link below to find dates and details to join us. Partial scholarships are available to those in need. We hope you enjoy this presentation, and we hope you will come join us at the Rock. Until then, we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
My name's Matt. I'm an alcoholic. Jewel, I'm going to give it the best I got. All right. The best I got is pray a lot before I get up here. So I went up to the bathroom, and the bathroom floor is clean because my mind is not right. And the only way that I can act right, like Bill was saying, is work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not one of those people whose mind got good. It still isn't, and I can't stop thinking about myself. So if you guys don't mind, no matter what you think of this few minutes I talk, act like you like it a lot when I leave. I don't mind if you're faking it, just please don't hurt my feelings. I'm the guy that pulls up to a traffic light, and if the person next to me doesn't smile at me, I think, what did I do to deserve that? I really am all I think about. And because of you guys and because of the program Alcoholics Anonymous, every now and then when I allow it, you can't tell that because I act right. So thank you for letting me do this. Bill called me. I guess there's a committee that decided on this. Hopefully y'all get to be on the committee again after tonight. But I really do thank you. It's an honor. It's a little overwhelming to be asked to do something like this. Especially on Friday night and listening to the challenge and seeing Ray and Paul. Paul he's sitting there at the same spot he was sitting in maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and I was in a bad spot, and someone said, you need to talk to this guy. And Paul walked around with me after the Friday night speaker. I don't know how many laps we made, but he listened to me. And he shared some of his experience with me, and he told me that he loved me, and he told me that God loved me. And I had never met him before, and I never talked to him before, and I needed that night, so thank you. And I know you've done that for countless men, but that night, I'm glad you did it for me. So thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you for the challenge, Jewel. So I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to tell you my story. I have a sponsor now. But the first sponsor I had told me, if you're ever asked to tell your story, look at this in the big book. And I'm not a quote guy, but it says something along the lines of, I'm supposed to share with you how I established my relationship with God. And that's what I'm going to do. So the overwhelming part, I came to my first Rock in 1999. I came with my roommate. His name's Travis. And we were really excited, and we were in this treatment center, and everybody was going to the Rock, and it was hard to get in. Like you had to go leave your, I don't know, it was like midnight or something. It was a big deal, and you had to go to Bill's house, and you had to leave your registration there. So we did it, and we were really excited, and something happened, and it hurt my feelings, and I don't even really remember what it was, but damn, it made me mad. And it was against me, like everything is. And it was something where everybody was a part of it. My roommate and I weren't. I said, I'll never go back to that place again. That place is not AA, it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm never going there again. And I told everybody I could about it. And I think this man, Bill Sanders here, heard about that, and he called me one day, and he said, I would like for you to come speak at the Rock this year. And I don't know if he heard about it or if he didn't, but I said, Bill, I don't think I can do that. And he said, sure you can. You just say yes and come. And I said, well, there's something I need to talk to you about. And he said, all right, meet me at Fuddruckers. I don't know if you guys ever go eat with Bill. He loved eating at Fuddruckers over at the Perimeter Mall. So I start to tell this man who puts in all this service work like the committee and all these guys do to put this thing on, how my feelings got hurt, and for 7 or 8 years I hadn't come back to the rock again. And instead of busting out laughing at how ridiculous that was, he put his hand on top of my hands as I was talking. And he let me finish, and he said, "I'm really sorry that you've had those feelings, and is there anything I can do to make it better?" And I said, "No, I think I just needed to say it." And he said, "So, I'll see you in October." And I came and I got to do the Saturday morning thing, and it was a blessing. It was a true blessing. So all of these guys, giants, guys who do service work so people like me can come and get a little piece of this. Showed up here this afternoon, terrified, thinking of myself, heard everybody laughing at the barbecue, and decided to stay at my room because the laughter scares me sometimes because I think of myself, and it's like all of them are there and I'm here. So we had our cabin meeting, and we sat in a circle, and I was looking around, and I only knew 1 or 2 of the guys, and I started having that uncomfortable feeling, and then 2 or 3 guys shared, and I felt at home. I came into the auditorium tonight, and I felt nervous, and I felt scared, and 2 or 3 people started sharing from up here, and I felt at home. So I'm going to share with you guys, as best I can, how I established a relationship with God. So first of all, my mom and dad got married when my mom was 15 and my dad was 19. And we're from Tennessee, so that's not that unusual, right? They were probably old. And my mom needed to get out of the house, and my dad needed to get out of the house, and they got married. And you would kind of think the story, they had a kid right away, but they didn't. They waited 7 years. But my dad has a lot of the same stuff that I have, and my mom's last grade of school was 10th grade, and she never really knew what he was going to do or if he was going to be there or not. Lyndon Johnson came to my hometown in Columbia, Tennessee in the mid-'60s and opened up a community college. Or he didn't open it, but he was there for the grand opening. There was no community colleges before that. It was this new thing, this new plan. And because there was a community college in that town in Columbia, Tennessee, my mom, whose last grade of completed school was the 9th grade, went and took the ACT, and she made a 26 on it. I made a 19, and I had everything you could possibly get given to you, right? And she went into school, and she became a radiologist. She went to school for 2 years and became a radiologist, and that was 1976. I was 6 years old when she graduated. But because she was new, there was something called ultrasound that was starting to go into the hospitals, and they let the new radiologists learn ultrasound, and my mom ended up with a career that supported us. And that's something I didn't think about till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't even think about it when I got here. I had to be sober for about 10 years to see the sacrifice my mom put in. So I have 2 sons now, and it's all I can do with my wife to take care of things. So my family always loved me. I never felt like I wasn't loved, but there's a lot of alcoholism and there's a lot of addiction. And I'm not one to really go into a lot of the stuff, but I can tell you this. When I was a kid, I saw things that my mom and my dad and my aunts and my uncles did, and my family was incredibly close. I have 26 first cousins, tons of aunts and uncles. We all lived in the same town. I'm one of those families that only about 10% of the people ever even leave the county. I'm not sure my grandmother ever left the county. And I knew I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to do what they did. But I always felt different, y'all. I always felt different. Let me give you just a quick example of this. I lived in this little town, and there was this neighborhood, and it was called Sunnyside. And that's where all the cool kids lived. That's where all the people who I wanted to be lived. And I lived in a neighborhood called Pleasant Hills, which doesn't sound all bad. It was across the highway, but the kids from Sunnyside would come over and take the L off our sign, and I had to pull in every day and look at it, and it said Peasant Hills. That hurt my feelings, So I always felt different. I always felt different. And the Just Say No campaign was happening, right? And I got involved in the Nancy Reagan Just Say No campaign. And I thought, you know, I can make a difference here. And I was good at it. And when I was in high school, I would go around to the elementary school and I would talk about the dangers of alcohol and drugs and things. I got my picture in the paper, and my family was always in the paper, but this was the first time somebody got their picture in the paper for something like that. And people were proud of me. I had a job at Kroger, and I sacked groceries, and somebody would be like, that's that guy, you know, and he goes around and helps out kids and stuff, and it made me feel good. And right about that time is when I first heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was dating a woman, and her family was the ideal family. They were the Sunnyside family. And one night, Christmas Eve, I'm watching television with her and her mom and her dad gets a telephone call, and that was back in the days when you had to get up to answer the phone. And he goes to answer the phone, and he comes back in, and he says, I'm going to go meet a guy. I'll be back in a little while. And my girlfriend and her mom didn't blink an eye. And I was like, what would a guy leave? What is he doing? What is he going? And I said, Heather, where's your dad going? And she said, he's probably going to talk to an alcoholic. I was like, why would somebody leave this nice thing to talk to an alcoholic? And she said, because my dad's an alcoholic. And I said, I've never seen your dad take a drink. And she said, he hadn't drank in 20-something years. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I've never heard of AA. I don't understand what that means. And she said, he's in AA and he helps people. So I go through this thing and I keep doing it. And they offered me a scholarship to go to school and become a counselor, a drug and alcohol counselor, to help people that have a problem with drug and alcohol. And I'm not interested in that because I'm going to be an attorney, Jewel. I got big things in store, and I appreciate your kind compliment, but I got big stuff in store. Now, I need to tell you guys this. How many people in here have ever been to treatment? Can you just raise your hand? How many people have been to treatment more than 5 times? Now, I want you to listen to this one. How many people have been to treatment before you ever took a drink or a drug? That's how crazy I am. They sent me to a residential treatment center. I never tasted alcohol or had a drug in my life. I got there, I did everything they said, they tested me, they sent me back and said, it's not alcohol or drugs. It's like, what the hell is it? Give him some Prozac. So, I don't know exactly when it happens, but somewhere in there I can't really avoid this anymore. And I was at college and I took my first drink, and it is this thing we say, everything changed. Everything changed for me that night. I think I liked myself more. I think the people that were around me liked me more. I didn't worry about what I said yesterday. I didn't worry about what I was going to say tomorrow. I felt at perfect peace and ease. And I've never really been able to describe it, but I heard a woman in a meeting describe it once, and it was perfect for me. She said, my head is like silverware in a blender, but when I take a drink, the blender turns off. And that's exactly what happens for me. I am full of fear, I'm full of anxiety, I'm full of every uncomfortable feeling you can have, and it doesn't take very many drinks before that's completely put at ease. So once I figured this out, and I think I was probably 20 years old, maybe a little younger, I just thought it would be a good idea if I drank all the time because I always felt uncomfortable. And I started having some consequences, but there wasn't anything I couldn't handle. I mean, it was DUIs and a couple of lost relationships, nothing serious. And I don't know about you guys, but I went to jail 7 times, and jail is not a big deal for me. It's really not. I don't particularly like it, but I don't mind it either. I'd rather go to jail than have my feelings hurt. I guarantee you that. I cannot stand to have my feelings hurt. You guys remember that when I'm done talking. So consequences started happening, and my friends, and I want to, perception's a funny thing, 'cause I don't talk about family stuff, because I could tell you, this is what happened. I'm an only child, and my parents got divorced when I was 3 years old, and they got remarried when I was 6, and they got divorced again when I was 8. All I ever wanted was my mom and dad to be together. I went 2 times, and I found out when I got here that alcoholics do stuff like that. They get married to each other, they get divorced, and they'll remarry each other again. Some of y'all have probably done that. It's not that unusual with us. I could make it a pity story, but I never felt unloved. I never, ever felt unloved. I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't like myself most of the time, but I never felt unloved. So people around me, my friends and things, said, Matt, you don't have to quit drinking. You just need to not drink as much. You know, I was a beer drinker, and they said nothing bad ever happens the first 6 beers. And it didn't. Just drink 6. Drink slower. Drink water in between. And I was astonished that I couldn't do it. So I solicited some help, and I started asking the bartenders and the places we went, do not give me the 7th beer. I started only taking enough money for 6. I started asking my friends, remind me when I get 5 or 6. And I would ask them to do that for me, and then when they did what I asked them to do, I would tell them I'm a grown man and you stay out of my business. Or I would tell the bartender, isn't my money good here? And then I started going to treatment. And I went back to that treatment center that I went to without drinking, and I qualified myself this time. I was qualified to be there this time. And then I went to another treatment, and then I moved to a different town, and then I moved to a different state, and then I got a different job. And everybody always rallied around me because my family loved me. My family loved me. They did the best that they could do. But I always, always, always drank again. Every time. In 1997, I started having health problems, and I'd only been drinking for 7 years. So I went to the doctor, and they sort of tricked me into going to the doctor. They told me, I worked for my uncle's cable company, and they told me they were changing health insurance, and I had to go have a physical, but we didn't even have health insurance. That's how detached from reality I was. I didn't have insurance, but they told me we were changing it. And the doctor said, we're worried about your liver enzyme count, you know, and this is what it is. And I believed the doctor. I didn't doubt her a bit. And she said, how much do you drink? And I knew that I couldn't tell her the truth because they were going to accuse me of being an alcoholic. So I told her, you know, I just said the best thing for me to do here is I'll half it. And I said I drink 10 or 12 beers a day. And she said, 10 or 12 beers a day? And I immediately thought, this is not good because my lie is shocking to her. And she said, do you understand? And I really need you guys to hear this. I didn't doubt her. It wasn't a denial thing. I knew I had quit eating at that point. I couldn't eat and drink, and I would eat about once a week. And I would go have breakfast, and I would say to myself, I need to make sure I get all 4 food groups. Like, I thought that was the key thing to eating once a week. Like, make sure you get all the stuff. And I would eat all I could eat, and then I would just drink. So I told her that I was going to drink 12 beers that night and then 11 the next night, and I was going to cut back 1 a day, and I would come back to see her in 12 days, and I will have not drank anything. And I think she said okay. But when I left, she called my mom on emergency contact, and my mom and my stepdad drove over from Atlanta. I was in Huntsville, and they knocked on my apartment door and said, the doctor called us, and we know what's going on, and we want to help you. And I'm an only child. And I told you what my mom did when it was just she and I. She put herself through school. She did all that stuff, and everything. And I looked my mom in the eye, and I said, I had rather die than quit drinking. And I shut the door on her, and they had to get back in their car and drive back to Atlanta. And I wasn't telling her a lie, because for me, when you guys and they said quit drinking, that meant I have to go back to the silverware and the blender. I don't want the consequences from my alcohol use. I don't. And I don't want to hurt my mom. I don't want her to say, all I want you to do this year for Christmas is just don't drink for 48 hours at our house. That's all I want. Don't spend any money. Don't get us any presents. And I can't. I can't not do that. I don't want to be that way, but I don't really have a choice, because I absolutely can't have my mind the way it is without alcohol. I can't. I can't do it. So I continued to drink, and I get sent to another treatment. I think it's the 4th one, and it's a place called Buffalo Valley in Tennessee. And this time I say, you know what? I mean business, and I did mean business. I did mean business. Some guys from AA came, and it inspired me, and I appreciate what they said, and I liked what they said, and I wasn't ashamed of being an alcoholic. I never was ashamed of being an alcoholic. As a matter of fact, when people complained about my drinking, I would say I'm an alcoholic, and I thought they would go, sorry, we didn't know. Like, I thought that was an explanation for this, like, you know, you blacked out and you did this. It's like, I know, and I don't blame you for being mad, but I'm an alcoholic. I thought they'd be like, that explains it. So I went to this place and I got out, and my dad came and picked me up. And I remember being in the parking lot, and I said, Dad, if I do what those people say, I don't ever have to drink again. And I said have to drink again. So I had accepted that there was no choice in this. My dad started crying, and he was not the kind of guy that cries easily. My uncle gave me a different job, and it was great, y'all. I went into the Bradford Center, and I went back to Huntsville. I went into the Bradford Center, Huntsville. I said, I'm an alcoholic. I just got out of treatment, and I would like a list of your local AA meetings. And the lady gave me a list and showed me where the meetings were. And I never went to a single meeting, and here's why I did it. Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who need to quit drinking, but they don't want to quit drinking. And I actually want to quit drinking, and for me to go to AA at this point, now that I've decided to quit drinking, would be self-centered, because I would be taking time from somebody who really needed it. So if I ever want to drink, I'll go to AA, but I don't need it. And 6 months later, I drove by the swimming pool and I saw a woman in a yellow bikini, and I said, there's no way I'm an alcoholic at 27, and I did a U-turn and went to the Shell station. So now I've tried AA, I've tried psychiatrists, I've tried counseling, I've tried 3 different states, I've tried having a girlfriend, not having a girlfriend, 2 jobs, no job, going back to school, I've tried everything. And in June of 1998, the night before Father's Day, I decided to bring some joy into my dad's life, and I drank my normal amount, and somewhere along the way added a liter of vodka to that, and I ended up at his house. And vague memories of it. My mom and dad didn't talk at this point. They probably hadn't talked in 8 or 10 years, but my mom had a feeling. She had a feeling in her stomach that something was wrong. So she called my dad the night before Father's Day in 1998 and said, Matt is there. And my dad said, yeah. And she said, please let me talk to him. And he said, he's asleep. And she said, please wake him up. And he said, he's been drinking. I can't wake him up. Just call tomorrow. And she said, I need to talk to him. Please go wake him up. And he wouldn't. And she said, I'm going to call the police if you don't go wake him up. He couldn't wake me up. And she said, take him to the hospital. Something's wrong. Hospital was an hour drive away. I assume, didn't know what else to do, so he took me to the hospital, and I had a 0.42 blood alcohol level. And when I got there, I woke up, and the doctor said, you have a 0.42 blood alcohol level. And I said, that's not possible, because if I had that, I would be dead. And he said, if you weren't an alcoholic, you're right. But alcoholics sometimes get to this point. So I went into the hospital, and I went through something called DTs. And I thought morning shakes were DTs, but I went through DTs, and they put straps on my chest, and I had convulsions, and I went into coronary care. And they told my family, I found out later, that they weren't sure if I was going to live or not. And my dad leaned over as they were taking me down the hallway, and he said, if you make it through this, I'll buy you a new car. Because that's what he had. It's crazy. That's what he had. That's what he had. I'm his only kid. I'll get you a car if you can make it through this. In the town I grew up in, black people lived in one area, white people lived in another area, and that's it. There were no Asian people, there were no Jewish people, there was a Catholic church, and we thought they were outsiders. It could not be more segregated than it was. Weren't allowed to spend the night at each other's house, weren't allowed to be in the same swimming pool, any of that stuff. And I had those feelings. That's the way I grew up. That's the way I was brought up. And I went into this hospital, and I've never shared this before, and I prayed, and this came to me today. There were 2 ladies there. One was named Maybelline Clark, and one was named Sonia Jones. And these 2 ladies were both African-American ladies. One was probably 30, and one was in her 60s, and they loved me unconditionally, and I was not very lovable for an entire week. They did 12-hour shifts and they rotated. And my skin was so dry from being dehydrated. They had to give me sponge baths, and just dry skin would pile up. I only ate once a week, so I ate 5 times a day once I quit drinking, and they would have to go in and make me something to eat at this hospital, and they loved me. And I started feeling better, and this little lady that was about 4'10" came in. Her name is Starling Bailey, and she came in and she said, I found the best treatment center for long-term care that we can find. Vanderbilt did a study, and it's called MAR, and it's in Atlanta, and I realized they had been plotting against me. They had been plotting against me, and they didn't like this, you know. And things were happening to me at this point, and man, I don't know if you guys ever been through DTs, but you think your thoughts are with, things would happen to me like, I would tell Sonia, I know that there's no spiders on the wall right now, and you know there's no spiders on the wall right now, but could you go get that newspaper and rake those spiders off the wall right there? And she would go over and rake the wall. And I had this barbershop, those things, that I had those going in the corner of my room. So I thought maybe I was dreaming that they talked about treatment, but they weren't. So I got out of the hospital, and we drove to Atlanta. And it was my mom and my stepdad and I was in the back seat. I'm 28 years old. And there's a place called Gentry's Walk. Some of y'all probably may have lived there. And it was a Sunday. I hear Robert laughing over there. It's a Sunday. And we pulled into the parking lot of Gentry's Walk on North Peachtree there, and that's where the apartments were for this treatment center that Starling thought was so good. And we went around, kind of drove around it, and my mom says, what do you think? And I was like, I mean, it's not the nicest place that I've ever lived. And she said, you know, it could be nicer. And when she said that, I leaned back. You know, I'm in the back seat and they're in the front. And I'm like, all right, that was easier than I thought. And they pulled up to the North Peachtree, and I remember this as if it were yesterday. I remember my stepdad looking and kind of getting ready to pull out. And I said, well, where are we going now? And my mom said, we're going home. And I don't know the word you use for this, I guess inflection, but I said, where are we going? And there was 3, like where we're going. But her where was definitely just the 2 people in the front seat. Like it was clear, like, well, we're going home. And I said, well, what am I gonna do? And she said, we don't know. And I said, I don't live here, I don't know anybody here, and she said, we understand that. And I said, well, what do I do? And they said, again, we don't know. So then the apartment complex didn't look as bad. And the next morning I got interviewed and I got accepted and I went into treatment at this place. And I hated it, and I hated it for a long time. And I had 2 roommates, one was named Dwayne, one was named JP. And I'd been there for a couple of weeks, and we had an AA booklet, and we looked for meetings, and we looked one night, it was a Monday night, and there was a meeting called Peachtree Corners. And it was at the corner of Peachtree Corner Circle and Spalding. We went up there, and I had this sheet that I had to fill out for meetings, and it had a thing for a temporary sponsor, and I've already tried AA, and it doesn't work. I've tried AA 2 times, and it doesn't work. Those guys came in and promised all that stuff at the last treatment center I was at, but then I saw that lady in the bikini, and it made me drink again. So that's, you know, I don't know what they're talking about. So I go up to this guy, and I just somehow thought, you know, if I'm going to do this and I have to get a temporary sponsor, I might as well get the guy who's dressed nice. And he was dressed up. You know, he was wearing a coat and tie, and he was collecting money. I was like, he's not dressed nice and he's collecting money. Found out later he was making change for a $5 big book for somebody, but it seemed like a lot of money to me. And I asked him if he would be my temporary sponsor. And he said, do you want to stay temporarily sober? And he kind of smiled, and I was still, I mean, it wasn't clear to me that it was a joke, or, you know, I didn't know. And he recognized that. And he said, are you an alcoholic? And I said, I'm an alcoholic. And he said, do you know what an alcoholic is? I said, I absolutely know what an alcoholic is. If there's anything I know, it's what an alcoholic is. I mean, I don't know much, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know what an alcoholic is. And he said, what is it? It's like, well, it's a guy who drinks too much and has all these consequences. He said, no, there's plenty of people that drink too much and have consequences that aren't alcoholics. And he said, but don't worry about it, I'll show you, it's in this book. And he read the big book, and it's like, no, I've already read that. It's the second book. I've read the big book. What's the next book? And he goes, yeah, we're going to study the big book. And I wasn't sure about it. And he looked at me, and this is when I got hope in Alcoholics Anonymous. This was the night everything changed for me, right? He said, have you ever thought about something a woman said to you 10 years ago and felt like kicking the windshield out of your car? And I looked at him and I said, that happens to me every single day. I think about something that happened in the 80s and I feel it right now. I can imagine something that may happen tomorrow and feel it right now. And when I get like that, I have no answer. And he said, I think like that too. And the only two things that I've ever found that gave me peace was alcohol and Alcoholics Anonymous. And my wife won't let me stay at home if I'm drinking alcohol, so I found a way to do it here. And I got hope. I've been to psychiatrists, I've been to treatment, I've been to all sorts of things, and this man that I've never seen before in my life in the middle of the cafeteria at Peachtree Corners asked me about kicking my windshield out of my car because of something happened 10 years ago, and I immediately got hope. I felt hope. And for the next few months, well, he said, meet me back here at 7 o'clock on Friday. And I said, I thought the meeting started at 8. And he said, it does start at 8, but we're going to meet at 7. And I said, there's no way I'm going to get Jay. These guys we barely got here at 8. They're not coming at 7. And he came and picked me up. I found out later he didn't have a job. His sponsor said, this guy's going to keep you sober till you get a job. But every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, he picked me up at 6:30, drove to the meeting. We put all the chairs out. We went downstairs and we started out at the very beginning of the big book, and we went through the big book and we waited till everybody was gone from the meeting and put all the chairs up, and he drove me back home. So for the first 4 or 5 months, I was with him 4.5 hours, 5 hours, 4 nights a week. And he loved me unconditionally. He absolutely loved me unconditionally. So I didn't know that the AA meeting wasn't set up for us when we got there. Like, I always go to AA meetings in church and there's coffee brewing, and there's stuff. I had never gotten to a meeting early. I didn't know y'all were setting everything up. I thought the church just did it for us because they felt bad for us. And he told me this early on. He said, AA is not a place you go, it's a way you live. And he goes, you think AA is a place you go. You think AA is at 8 o'clock at this place. He goes, that's a time where people get together and share, but that's not AA. That's a meeting. AA is how you live. And for you and I, it's on this night, it's 6 to 10. So we did stuff. And we started out in the big book, and he made me bring a Webster's dictionary. And we started out, and I learned the history, and I liked it. And I liked learning all the stuff. And I had these moments like where I kind of feel like I got in AA. And when I started coming to those meetings and setting up the chairs, and then the meeting would happen, it didn't feel like I was attending your meeting anymore. I felt like it was my meeting because I set the chairs up or I took the garbage out. There was this woman that went to our meeting. Her name was Lauren. And when I got promoted from setting up the chairs to taking out the garbage, Lauren had been taking out the garbage and she didn't want to give it up. She got there 2 or 3 months before me, and her sponsor and my sponsor talked, and they said Lauren was going to get promoted and I was going to start doing the garbage. And they brought me over there, and she wouldn't let go of it. And her sponsor was like, let go of the garbage bag. And she said, I don't want to. And she said, you got to go do something else. And I said, what was that? And they talked to me about the spirit of rotation. And it's like, what's the spirit of rotation? It's like the spirit of rotation is there's something for everybody to do, and you do it for a while, and then you move to the next thing. And I found out later that's why we do these things. We have these group conscious, and if you go to the bathroom at the wrong time, you're the treasurer the next 2 years, right? You got to be careful because they rotate these things, right? So I started taking out the garbage. And my roommates would call me all sorts of names when I took it out. So I started going out the side door because I didn't want to hear all that. I didn't mind taking out the garbage, but I don't want to hear all that. And they said, why you go out the side door? And I said, because my friends are saying all this. And he said, that can only help your ego and pride, so you walk right on by the sidewalk. He said, you may see some of those people making fun of you, not here next week. So one night I asked Pat, I said, when can we stop doing this? When can we stop coming early? And when can we stop doing this? There's got to be somebody else new here by this time. And he said, how long is it that we've been coming early and doing this? And I said, it's been about 6 months. And he said, all right. And I'm like, all right, you know, it's kind of like my mom with this. I goes, and he goes, how long have you been sober? I said, about 6 months. And he goes, well, this is working. So we kept doing the chairs. And we started going through this, and this is my end. This is my real end to Alcoholics Anonymous. I told you I would call myself an alcoholic. I had no shame with it. I'm an alcoholic, but I didn't know what alcoholism was. I did not know what it was. And in the doctor's opinion, we went through my life, and we looked at the mental obsession and the physical allergy. And he told me an allergy is an abnormal reaction. And he told me how it played out with him is when he takes a drink of alcohol, he does not know what's going to happen next. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. It doesn't matter what's at risk. It doesn't matter what he may lose. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. And he said, has that happened in your life? He asked me questions. He didn't tell me anything. And we went through examples in my life where I had, with all the power I could muster and all the power of the people that loved me could muster, tried to get me to stop at 6 beers. And it didn't matter what was at risk, and it didn't matter what I wanted. If I put alcohol in my system, I was going to drink. And that goes for everything else I put in my system. And I put anything in my system. I've put stuff in my system before and asked somebody what it was after I took it. Because it's going to turn the blender off, and that's all I really need, right? So I had that. And it helped me because I also am allergic to shrimp. And I don't know if any of you struggle with this part, but if you have a food allergy, it's a built-in bonus because I've eaten shrimp 2 times in my life, and that experiment is over, right? Like, it happened once, and it could be a few different things. But once it happens a second time, that's it. I have never, ever said to myself, I wonder if I just eat like 3 or 4 shrimp, what would happen? I've never had that thought one time. And he said, wonder why you have it with this. And then we got to talk about the mental component, because that's what makes it different. And he called it a 1-2 punch, a mental obsession, physical allergy. You may be able to duck one, but you can't miss the other one. And the obsession was more powerful to me because he asked me questions again, and he said, have you ever tried to quit drinking completely? Have you ever had a woman tell you that she was going to end the relationship if you didn't quit drinking? And I had that happen 2 times. And he said, did you want the relationship to end? And I said, I didn't. And he said, did you believe her when she said it? And I did. And he said, what did you do? And I said, I drank. And he said, why? And I don't have an answer to that. No one had ever just asked me why. A job at CNN, beautiful job at CNN. My boss's name's Jeff. He said, you're a good worker. We love having you here. Everybody loves you. You do good work. But when you come in the morning, you smell like alcohol, man. So I started trying to do stuff with my breath because I didn't know alcohol came out your skin. I had the freshest breath of anybody who's ever worked at CNN, and they would still say, you smell like a brewery. And I'm like, there's no way. But when you drink 24 beers and you come to work in June and July, you're going to stink. It doesn't matter what you do to your breath. And he said, if you do this again, we have to fire you. And I loved that job. And he said, what did you do again? And I said, I drank. And my boss cried when he fired me. But I drank. The courts, health, all of it. So then I start to get curious because I have this and now I can call myself an alcoholic, and it's like, well, what do you do with this? And he said, well, I have a feeling the book's going to tell us. So he said, do you know what the chapter There Is a Solution about? And I was like, the solution? And he goes, you would think so. But the first 8 pages are about the problem again. So we start going through There Is a Solution, and he starts talking to me about spiritual stuff, and that's when I thought you guys were a cult. And I was like, there's another room, and this is what happens, man. You get suckered in, and they're going to take 10% of my money. There's probably a room upstairs where and he said, it's not really like that, He said, you just have to believe something. The first thing you have to believe is that you can't do it. And we worked through some stuff, and I was able to do that. So we got to the 3rd step, prayer. And I remember we were at a church, the same church, and it had this little thin window, and he pushes his chair back, and he's got on a suit, and he pushes his chair back, and I'm like, what is he doing? And he got down on his knees to pray. And I'm like, man, there's people in here, like, what are you doing? And he had talked to me about a month before and said, this is what I do, and I started doing it at home, and it worked. I hadn't drank since I did that. I would get down on my knees. And my roommate, Travis, did the same thing. And we're grown men, but we would talk to each other in the living room, and I would say, I'm going to go in and do my prayers, which means don't come in there because I'm going to be praying on my knees, and I can't have you see that. And they would do the same. And it's like, man, how could you have these two things going on at the same time? I'm praying on my knees, and my ego's so big, I don't want my roommate to see that. So Pat got down, and he said, we're going to do the third step prayer. And I didn't know if I wanted to do it or not. And he said, listen, I love you, and I've enjoyed getting to know you, but at this point, you've got to decide. You know what you suffer from now. If you want to go on, you got to do this, but if you don't want to go on, it's okay. But you got to make a decision. And I got down on my knees, and I did the prayer. And then we got up, and it says, sometimes you feel this, sometimes you don't. And I'm like, I'm a don't. That was just weird for me. And he goes, do you want to do it again? I was like, yeah, let's do it again. We did it again. It's still weird. It's like, we can keep on doing it. It's like, no, that's enough for tonight. Two's good. So on the way home, he stopped at this Shell station, and we went in. And I was always trying to put gas in Pat's car. And he would never let me put gas in his car. It's like, man, just let me get a little bit of gas in the car. He's like, no, you don't have to put gas in the car. So we go into this Shell station, and he gets me a legal pad. I didn't know he got me a legal pad. He got a legal pad. I found out later it was for me. And he takes me to my treatment center, and we're in the parking lot, and he turns the thing sideways, and we read in the book, and it talks, step 4, resentments. We set them on paper. And he goes, I want you to go down through here at all your resentments. And I'm like, so what else? And he goes, just do that, and call me. So I went down with the columns, and then I did the next thing, and the why, and start to feel like I'm just another one of those things. I start to feel like I'm in AA. And I get through, and we're working on it, and one night he drops me off 2 or 3 weeks later, and he says, how are you doing on the sex inventory part that I gave you? And I said, I'm doing pretty good on it. I'm almost done. And he said, well, let me see it, let me take a look at it. And I was like, well, it's in the apartment. And he goes, well, it's fine, go in and get it, I'm right here. And I said, well, I actually haven't done it. And he said, so you lied to me. And he was smiling, and we're in the light was shining on his face, and I can still see this, and you have to know him. It was a loving look. It was like, so you lied to me. And I was like, no, I didn't lie to you. And he goes, well, you said you had it done, and I said, go get it, and you said you didn't do it. That's a lie. And I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed because this man had done nothing other than love me, just unconditionally, and I just lied to him. And he looked at me, and sometimes he called me Matthew, and he said, Matthew, you don't have to lie to me. I was like, man, this is the basic lesson, y'all. I'm 28 years old, and I don't think I grasped that I didn't have to lie to people. I feel so bad about myself. I feel so insignificant in this world that I feel like I absolutely, positively have to perform or I have to be something I'm not to get acceptance. And he said, in essence, I love you no matter if you've done it or if you haven't done it. But you need to do it. So go do it. So I did it. And we get to the 5th step, and we meet in the basement of the church, and he reads in the book, and then he shuts it, and he says, all right, get to it. I was like, get to what? And it says all their life story. And I'm like, I don't know where to start. And he said, you're from Tennessee. And I said, yeah. And he said, just start with the sex with farm animals, and we'll go from there. And it didn't, it was not, he said, just do it. So I told him my life story. And he went to Blimpie and got us a sandwich, and we got back, and it said, take the book off the shelf, and we had the book, and he goes, close your book and put it on the shelf. I put the book on the shelf, and he was like, take it off the shelf. I took it off the shelf, went through, finished my 5th step, walked upstairs. It was November of 1998, and he did what Paul did to me years later. He looked at me with 100% sincerity and said, I love you, God loves you, I forgive you, God forgives you. And I believed him. I believed him. And the next time that I went to an AA meeting, and I'm in, y'all. I mean, I was in before my fifth step. I was amazed that if I did what y'all said, I didn't have to drink. I mean, I was amazed. I loved AA. Some of the people that are here tonight were in the meetings when I went to. I mean, I thought AA was the best thing ever. I loved it. But when I did that fifth step and I went to the next meeting and we were in a circle and we were doing the Lord's Prayer, I realized that I had not looked anyone in the eye in years. And we were in that circle, and all of my friends that I had known for the last 3 or 4 months, I looked around and I was looking in their eye. And I didn't know I wasn't looking them in the eye until I looked them in the eye, if you guys know what I mean. Like, I never really knew I was looking at the ground until I didn't. And then it says we can look the world in the eye. And I was like, man, how do they know this stuff? Like, how do they know if I do that I'm going to be in my group and start looking at everyone in the eye? And we kept going, and we did the next steps, and we did the next steps, and then we got to the amend, and I said, I know the first amend I want to make is to my girlfriend from college, and I just mistreated her and cheated on her, and I did some stuff. And he said, all right. He goes, tell me a little bit about that. And I told him, and he said, what was the last thing you remember her saying to you? And I said, okay, hold on a second, let's see. Okay, I got it. She said, I hope I don't ever see you again. And he said, your amend is going to be do everything in your power to make that happen. And I thought, that's the worst that's the worst ever. I really want her to see that I'm not yellow anymore, and I've gained 30 pounds, I'm not severely underweight. And he said, no. He said, I'll tell you what. He goes, I'm sorry, he goes, this is what I want you to do. And I was like, okay. He goes, I want you to treat every woman in your life from this point forward with the dignity and grace that you didn't treat her with. I said, that's not fun. And I've fallen short of that, but that's the challenge. So we get to the other steps, and we go through, and we get to the 12th step, and he says, all of the notes that you have in your book are going to come in handy because you got to start sponsoring people. And it's like, listen, I love AA more than anybody, and I'll take out the garbage from now till the end of time, and I'll get here an hour early. There's absolutely no way. I don't even have a driver's license. I didn't have a car, driver's license, nothing, right? And he said, it doesn't really matter what you're capable of, because sponsoring someone is being willing to spend the time with them and talk about what's in the book. Just sit and talk about what's in the book. So I started looking for a sponsee, and no one wanted me to sponsor them. And he said, I don't think you're going to be able to find a sponsee here. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, you got to go somewhere where people are desperate enough to want what you have, and that's not here. So I started going to detox meetings, and there were some people in the meetings that were desperate enough to, they wanted what I had. Now, I did meet one of my first sponsors was a pilot, and he had a lot of stuff. I didn't have a driver's license or anything, but it's really hard to lay down the law to your sponsee and say, and don't forget to pick me up before the meeting. It's like, I'm in control of this relationship, but I do need a ride to the grocery store this afternoon, if you don't mind. I'm out of bread. But we started doing big books, and we started sponsoring, and we started going through things. And at this point, I have so much hope, y'all. I have so much hope. I love AA. I've been sober for a year. I've been sober for 2 years. I didn't tell you guys this. I told you I'm an only kid. My mom and dad both got remarried. One when I was 10, one when I was 11, and their lives got dramatically better. They never should have been together. They knew they shouldn't have been together, and they've each found the person that they should be with, and they stayed married to them all the way through. And it went from, I'm a kid that's by himself, and his parents got divorced at 3, remarried, and divorced again. Like, man, give me another drink. Now don't complain about my drinking when you know that story. And after being around you guys, I'm an only kid who has 4 parents. because my stepmom and my stepdad loved me every bit as much as my mom and dad did. I lost my stepdad last May. He was every bit a father to me as much as my dad was. Loved me unconditionally. My stepmom lives in Tennessee now, and she's the last one of the 4 that is alive, and she tells me every single time I talk to her that she's proud of me. Now, she doesn't know what we know. She thinks I got sober. You know, she thinks I just finally said enough's enough. And I thought that for a little while. But instead of trying to explain to her what the disease of alcoholism is, which I have and didn't know, I say, thank you for thinking of me that way, and I love you too. Because I don't have to explain alcoholism to anybody unless it's somebody suffering from it. And only then if they'll listen. So, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. They said, you're not coming back to work for us, because this is not the industry for somebody trying to be sober. So there's a guy that some of you guys know, Doug Brush, and you know he is MAR, and he said, why don't you volunteer? And I said, man, you know, I can't manufacture humility, and I lack it. But when he asked me to volunteer, I was sure he meant volunteer to clean up the building or do something like that, because I like those sort of things. And I told him I absolutely would volunteer. And I asked him what he wanted me to do. And he said, I would like for you to sit in a group and just be with a counselor. And I thought, well, and do what? And he said, well, you've been through it, and just sit with them. And through doing that and volunteering for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to do that for a career, and I did it. I did it for 20 years, and I got to have some relationships. So I'm sponsoring people, and things are going good, and you know, I always wanted to be married. I always wanted to have a family. I'm so excited about AA. For the first 6 or 7 years, all I really did was go to AA meetings and do AA stuff and try to do big book studies, and I loved it. I was completely content with that. But at some point, when I was 34, 35, and I was like, you know, I want to start a family. So I started looking for somebody to start a family with in AA meetings. Successful for a lot of you guys. It was not successful for me. It didn't work out for me. And I just got to this point, you know, where I felt like I was, you know, I lived a life of self-centeredness, and I really felt like I was trying to live in God's will, and I didn't understand why other people get to be happy and other people get to have this, and I started getting back to that other people stuff. And I got to a low point, and it was just as low as anything that happened when I was drinking. But I was in AA, and I was doing AA stuff, but I was full of pity, full of self-pity. And I was in a relationship, and that relationship didn't work out. And I said, you know what, if this is what it is, it's not worth doing. It's not worth doing. I'd rather check out. It wasn't back to the silverware and the blender. It felt like it was even worse. It was deep emotional pain. And the people that I'm closest to came to me and they said, you got to get out of this relationship. And I couldn't get out of the relationship. I believed them. They loved me, but I couldn't get out of it. And I believe God intervened, and she got out of it. And I started looking and like, why does this happen to me? This is the 4th time this has happened to me. And my sponsor said, what do these women all have in common? Let's look at this, you know? And I was like, well, you know, they're not all from the South, and some of this, and what is not different color hairs. And he said, you picked them, idiot. That's what they have in common. They're not the problem, you are. So I got to a level in AA that I haven't gotten to, and I started looking at myself, and I started looking at some of the things that were wrong. And one of the things that was wrong is I'd never had financial problems when I was drinking, because I'm a beer drinker and I like to work, and that's a dangerous combination because I always had enough money for beer. But I started making a little money working, but I just had financial problems. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have any debt when I was drinking. I got debt when I got to AA. And I straightened up my financial life, and this woman showed up. Now, I'm going to tell you guys how she showed up, and I wish you wouldn't judge me by this, but at some point along the way here, I felt really bad about my drinking and driving. I woke up in blackouts, and I never hurt anybody, at least as far as I know. And I had horrible feelings about why do people go to prison? Why do people have these consequences? And I did it more than anybody, and I don't. So I started teaching DUI school when I was 10 or 12 years sober. And I'm working all the time, and I'm just going to tell you, I met my wife at DUI school. I did everything I could. I talked to everybody I could. I talked to my mentors. I talked to my sponsor. I'm like, they met her, and they said, this is the one. I'm like, this can't be the one. She was at the DUI school, and they're like, she got a DUI. And one of my friends asked her, they said, when was the last time that you had a drink? And she said, oh, I haven't drank since I got that DUI a few months ago. And I was like, well, she's not an alcoholic. I don't know. I have struggled in relationships. I'm needy. I need attention. I love attention. And I will get in a bad relationship, and I'll get in a bad situation if she's willing to tell me, you're good. I like this about you. That used to be my only requirement for being in a relationship. If you're willing to be in a relationship with me, we're good. I don't care. Well, I'll work through whatever issues you got, but if you're willing to stay with me, we're good. And it wasn't like that with her. And I took everything slow, and I ran it by everybody, and everything was good, and things were, it was amazing. And we decided to get married. And we went to pick out a ring on December 14th, 2011. And we picked out the ring she wanted. I'm 42 years old. I've never even been close to getting married before. And I looked at her and thought, man, I have somehow, like, she doesn't know, like, I think I've told her everything, but surely she couldn't still be here. Like, there must have missed something. So we got a ring, and we decided to go down and meet her parents. And I'm like, oh man, because she's a little bit younger than me, and I was really worried that, I don't know, I'm an alcoholic. I went back to the stuff. And I had a sponsor at the time. His name was David P., and he wore bow ties. So you guys, most of you know who I'm talking about. And we sat on the patio at Starbucks, and I said, I want to ask this man's permission to marry his daughter, but look at me and look at her. And he said, well, I will tell you this. I love everything about Holly, but there is one huge issue. And I said, what is that? And he said, she's definitely blind if she's with you. I have had some of the meanest sponsors. I have a mean sponsor here tonight. I'm going to tell you about him in just a minute. He called me a hypocrite not too long ago. Can you believe somebody would call me that? So he said, let's practice it. And I said, practice what? And he goes, I'll be her dad and you ask me. And I started talking to him, and everything was smooth. And I was like, well, I feel better now. I think I can do this. And I said, wait a minute. You love me. This guy doesn't know me. And he said, would you like to switch? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you be her dad, and I'll be you. And I said, okay. And I said, why would I want my daughter to marry an alcoholic? And he answered it. And I said, what's somebody your age doing dating my daughter? And he answered it. And he said, if you're 42 years old, why haven't you been married now? And I remember he said, because I haven't met anyone as beautiful as your daughter, sir. I was like, this guy's not going to go for this. So we go off to Florida, and I say a prayer. And I say in the prayer, God, I'm going to do this. Please let me know when. And I meet her dad, and he kind of likes me, and we're at a mall, and we're sitting on a bench, and Holly and her mom are shopping. And the thought that came, you need to ask him now. And I thought, I didn't think it would be at a mall, but okay, I'm willing to do it. And they came out, and it wasn't then, and then we did it. Went on about our way. We got home that night. We're sitting on the couch, and I'm starting to get nervous. And we were watching a football game. It got to halftime, and he turned the television off, and it's just he and I. And he said, what do you plan to do with the rest of your life, Matt? And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I've known this guy for 24 hours. And I said, well, I've been waiting for an opportunity to ask you this, but Holly and I have been talking and we would like to get married and I would like your permission. And he stood up and he gave me a hug. And I thought, man, this was way, way, way easier. David was right. And we sat back down, and when we sat down, I saw something come over his face. And it was not good. And I said, is everything okay? And he said, I know why you're in the line of work you're in. Holly told me you've had problems with alcohol and drugs. And I said, I have. And I said, I'm okay if you ask me any question that you want to ask me. And he said, well, I only think it's fair. And I said, I mean what I say. You're welcome to ask me anything. Nothing's off limits. And he said, how do you know that you're not going to drink again? How do you know you're not going to use drugs again? The pressures of being married. And I said, I don't know. And he sort of raised his eyebrow. And I said, I would like to explain, though, this is what I do. I wake up every morning and I get on my knees and I ask God to take away the obsession to drink and use drugs from me for that day. And I tell him I love him and I say, without you, I'm nothing, amen. And I've been doing that for about 14 years and I haven't drank, and I don't really plan on stopping doing that. And he looked at me in the eye and said, that's good enough for me. How? I'm a Skid Row bum, showed up here yellow, picked cocaine out of the floorboard of his car, drug addict, alcoholic. And this man heard me say to him what you guys told me and said, that's good enough to me, marry his only daughter. It would be good if the story ended there, but we're going to have a June wedding because that's awesome. And we got back and Holly was feeling sick. Anybody know about that when you start feeling sick? And she said, I wonder if I could be pregnant. And I said, well, there's no way that you're pregnant. And she went and got a pregnancy test, and she was pregnant. And it was January, and her parents were coming up to pick out the wedding venue that we were going to have in June. And we had to tell them that we're not getting married in June. We're actually getting married in April, and it's not going to be a wedding. We're going to have a party, and that's going to be it. And that man looked me in the eye, and it wasn't the same as hugging me and saying, that's good enough for me. And he said, I'm going to ask you one question. Did you know she was pregnant when you sat in my living room and asked permission to marry her? And I said, no, sir, I did not. And she wasn't pregnant then. But if I were you, I wouldn't believe me. But it's the truth. Now, I haven't asked him again. We've been married for 13 years now, but I'm still not sure he believed me. So we got married in April, and I called my friend Sam, who I met in AA, and he found us a house in 4 hours. We house shopped for 4 hours. We looked at 3 houses. It's crazy. I said, this house costs too much money. It's a used house. It's not even new. And we got our house at 2012, and we couldn't live where we live now if we bought it at 2011 or 13. 2012, when we got our house, was the only time we could have afforded our house. And we're never going to leave because we can't afford to go anywhere else. So that boy was born on September 8, 2012. Now I'm a 55-year-old man. I don't know how many days that is, but September 8, 2012 is the best day of my life. All I ever wanted was to be like those people at Sunnyside or be like those people I saw out or wherever. And I thought, if I thought and felt like they did, I could have that stuff too. But I think and feel the way I feel, and it ends up being this. I was a 30-year-old man before I figured out that it doesn't matter what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling. If I act right, results are coming. I didn't know that. It's the most basic of lessons. I didn't know it. So I have a 12-year-old son and we wanted another kid, and we went through some miscarriages, and it was difficult, and people in the program that had the same experience came to us at the hospital. This lady came in. She was a chaplain. We had a second trimester. Where we found out sex. We had no idea. And I thought, I need to be respectful to this woman, even though I'm a counselor and she's new, and she just whatever she says. And she said, hey, listen, I'm only going to take about 30 seconds of your time. I'm sorry for your loss. You're going to have people in your life that are mean-wellers. And she said, do you know what a mean-weller is? And I said, I do not know what a mean-weller is. And she said, a mean-weller is people who say things like, well, you have one healthy son, or you can try again, or, you know, they mean well. They're saying something to comfort you, and it's not going to comfort you, but they mean well. And I said, okay. And she said, but if you're blessed, you're going to have one or two people that are going to come, and they're not going to say anything, but they're going to be with you. And she said, be tolerant and patient with the mean-wellers, because they're doing the best they can, and spend as much time as you can with the other people. And the people in AA were those people. My friend Ashley showed up, and he just walked around the block with me, and his wife sat with Holly, and other people came, and they did what they did. And we made it through it. And we decided having one kid was perfectly well enough, and then another one came. And my time is up, but I'm going to tell you guys, he's 5 years old, and he needs a sponsor. My mom and I lived in one room. We didn't have a refrigerator. We had an igloo cooler. We would have to get whatever we needed for the day, but we didn't have anything to cool food. We lived in the same bed, obviously. And I would do things, and my mom would say, I hope one day you have a kid just like you. And she would say it in a loving way. When my son Hayden was born and she kept him, she said, you got lucky. You got lucky. Davis is that kid. She got 1 year of him before she passed. He is that kid. So when I went into that AA meeting that night and I got hope, I always think we focus on the newcomer. That's why we're here, but I also think that there's people here that are sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and they're hurting for whatever reason, an emotional thing, a relationship, finance, and I'm the guy who's messed up everything. I did everything wrong, but I have a program to make it right. And I have a program to get back on track. And my hope is, if anyone in here is hurting, or if anyone in here is ashamed or doing that, I've been sober this long, I should this, should that, should whatever, that you heard something in my story of total doing everything wrong the first time that gives you hope, because my life is so beautiful. I was in a meeting at the High Point group with Tom Morgan, and this man in the back of the room said, what if I had a beautiful life and never knew it? And I have never forgotten that. I turned around, and it gives me chill bumps to say it now. What if I had a beautiful life and never knew it? That would be sad indeed. Thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you for tolerating me. I am so happy that I get to take these clothes off and enjoy the rest of this weekend now. If no one has told you today, you are loved and you are accepted. There is absolutely no place on the face of this earth where you can do the stuff that we do and think the stuff that we think and come in and they say, nice to have you, Matt. Have a seat. I love you guys. Thank you for being with me tonight.